First Nosferatu, now the Wolfman. What is this? The Gilded Age? My name is Jason. I am the last manager of the last video store in the universe. Back at it again. Went to the movie theater. I saw some movies. I'm going to talk about them at length. I saw two movies. It's a double feature instant reaction for you. And I'm going to get into spoilers for both films. Spoilers for one of the films for patrons over at patreon.com/binge movies who get this instant reaction even more instantaneously and extended. Extended. Don't you want to be extended? All right, let's start with a comedy. One of Them Days. This is a kind of one of those rare things that we don't get anymore. It's an R-rated two-handed comedy from a lot of first-time talents and a megastar in the making. One of Them Days was directed by Lawrence Lamont. This is their first feature film. And it was written by Sarita Singleton, who's the daughter of John Singleton. She's written for television. She's a creative partner with Issa Rae on some of her stuff. Issa Rae is a producer on this film. Amongst what feels like about a dozen executive producers and producers. Which tells me of a couple of things. Tells me, one, you're going to have a first-time film director with a first-time screenwriter, it's an R-rated comedy for black folks, when one of the people who's in the movie, SZA, has never acted before, at least not in feature films, making their acting film debut. It's not exactly a bankable property. And with a lot of people of color and women behind the scenes of the production, it tells me that a lot of these people had to cash in some chips to get this movie made. And even more importantly, not just get the movie made, but get the movie into theaters. Because this definitely feels like a movie that could have been dumped onto Amazon, or it's honestly a little bit too good for Netflix. And it all comes down to a couple of key things, one of them being Keke Palmer, obviously. Who's between her and Cat Williams are kind of the only real like movie vets that are in the film. Boy, where do I start with this one? Okay. My philosophy is to try to get to movies as early as possible, not just to get these reactions out faster for patrons and for listeners. That's true. But it's also because I think there's this sweet spot between press screenings, if you have the luxury of getting access to those, and the early screenings that are open to the public, or you can apply for tickets for as a member of the general public. There's this sweet spot. The people who are most excited to see a movie are going to be the people who are there Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday night. Those people have bought tickets in advance. That first audience is going to be the audience who is likely the target audience. The marketing has worked, right? Something has got them in the door. This isn't just it's Sunday afternoon, it's 9 degrees outside. I'm sick of being in the house. I've been in the house since the holidays. Let's go do something. The roads are finally clear. Let's go see a movie. That's not the crowd you want to see a movie, especially a comedy with. You want to see it with people who are there, who are ready to laugh. And that's what I did. And then the Sony logo came up, and I cringed in my seat because I think that Sony, as a film studio, is one of the worst film studios currently active today. I think they make some of the sloppiest. We have entered into what many people are calling the slop era, just of culture, right? Movies, television, art, music, everything's slop. And I'm going to tell you, 2025, it's only going to get sloppier. So buckle up. the standards, the quality, nothing matters anymore, right? No, there is no quality, there is no standard. Um, everything is slop. Podcasts are slop. Everything's slop. And my long term instinct has been to say, well, then, but people don't want slop. They want good stuff. I no longer believe that after last year. I think people actually want slop. Maybe there's a slither of us who don't want slop, but Gen Z doesn't know anything but slop. Gen Alpha doesn't know anything about slop. Gen X, a lot of them want slop too. And boomers have been making slop for years, and they can't tell the difference. They don't know nothing from nothing. So when Sony comes up, which is basically a slop industrial complex, key piece of that machinery, I was like, well, this is going to suck. This is going to stink. And it surprisingly doesn't stink. It falls short of being a great comedy, and it ends up being a affable time at the movies with some funny moments. And if I were to break it down for you, I would say this is somewhere between, the elevator pitch would be, it's Friday meets the Odyssey. And that is a very interesting pitch. And I think there was probably a version of this screenplay, or the intention behind it by Singleton, was to invoke the Odyssey, but like a hood Odyssey, right? Which is like Friday kind of is. But it's these two characters who are caught in this situation, and they have to find their way out of it, and they meet this bizarre cast of characters throughout, and chaos ensues, right? And Keke Palmer is perfect for that. She is fantastic. When she's on the screen in this movie, or any movie for that matter, but especially in this movie, you just can't help but love her. You can't help but sympathize for her character. Can't help but root for her. She's got some funny stuff. She herself is just such an adorable, affable, cool figure. She just has charisma for days, so you just want to spend time with her. And her reaction to stuff, she's just perfect. What lets her down, I think, is two decisions, which is the screenplay feels very neutered in a way where it feels like the big idea of, I'll give you an example. Cat Williams' character shows up as a kind of homeless prophet, very much of the ilk of like a seer, right? Who gives them like foreboding warnings or whatever. He's a harbinger, but it is in the skin, and it's in the cultural artifice, if you will, of Los Angeles kind of hood culture. That's a funny idea. That's an interesting idea. And he would be perfect for that. He shows up way later than he should. The scene that introduces him starts off with promise, kind of goes nowhere. Then when he becomes a reoccurring figure to guide and warn and whatever, none of those jokes really land because they feel like they're a part of a cut of this movie that we didn't get. Without spoiling, it's really hard to explain, but it's like there's like all these callbacks, and they reference him, and they talk about him as if he's been this ongoing character for them, and he isn't. And the tone of the movie, this is kind of the second problem with the film, is it feels like it at times wants to lean into some really surreal, Singleton has been defined by some people, maybe even herself, her and Issa Rae, as like rap comedians, or they want to make rap comedy, and because they've done a couple of the shows together that were about the rap world or whatever, and very sort of elevated, cerebral, surrealistic kind of comedy like that. They have the unfortunate measuring stick of Atlanta. Atlanta's the best written television show, I think, of the last 25 years. As strange as it is, and as far-flung as it is, as really off the wall as the last season is, even by Atlanta standards, that is consistently one of the best written television shows I have ever seen in my life. And it's a two-hand between that and Reservation Dogs, which they're kind of cut from the same cloth. those shows are just fantastic. They're moving, they're emotional, they're thoughtful, they're funny, they're weird, they're strange, they're goofy, they're corny. They're just like every genre they could be, they are. And the thing is, Atlanta had a lot of episodes. In fact, the whole show, especially after like the first season, kind of feels like a surrealistic journey, like a hood odyssey, right? It feels like Ern and all these guys are just like going through whatever scenario, whatever country they're in, whatever part of town they're in. Doesn't matter if it's like international rap tour or going to Spotify stand-in or trying to go to like get out of eating a sushi joint or following like an MF Doom kind of, funeral LARPing exercise. Like there's just so many, picking up a piano. Like that is kind of the premise of that show after a while, is like, let's put these characters in these surreal odysseys, and or like a faux documentary about Goof Troop or a Goofy movie. Just great shit. And it's really funny. It's really smart. And this movie kind of tries to tap into some of that surrealism a little bit. But then it doesn't really commit to that bit. And I feel like there is a higher order of intelligence in Singleton's writing that feels like it got watered down, because I feel like they did a lot of improv on the set. I think Lamont allowed a lot of improv. And if you're Kiki Palmer, you can get away with that. But the problem with that is then you don't have any setups, punchlines at all. So you have humorous moments and humorous lines, and people say funny things, but the scenes themselves don't exactly come together as laugh out loud, comedic, beginning, middle, and end pieces of a film, if that makes any sense. So it's like it's got that Apatow sort of quality about it that I think it ends up kind of losing its own specialness. There's something in the stew here. There was elements of an idea that I think would make this potentially like a low tier comedy classic, like a modern one. That's why, and it just doesn't quite come together that way. It ends up being like, this is a pretty fun time. I enjoy it. It's really short. It's an hour and 37 minutes total. And it's paced very well. They get in, they get out, scene to scene. It has a lot of momentum. It does depend upon that one trope, which is one of these characters has got to be one of the dumbest fucking people who has ever lived for the plot to continue to happen after a certain point. But I feel like if they had leaned more into the surrealism of it, then they could have redeemed one of the characters so she's not as fucking stupid as she is in the film. And that would be a little bit less annoying for me. So what I'm saying is this falls into the trap that a lot of comedies do, which is there's something really smart, creative, and inventive in this that feels like by the time it made it to screen was watered down a little bit. So like a 4-star movie becomes a 3-star movie. But 3-star for a comedy is pretty good. I will say this, if you see this with a crowd of people who are laughing their ass off, obviously that's going to elevate it for you. I saw it with a half full group of people who just didn't really laugh all that much. It was a lot of like, what was the vibe in that theater? The vibe was really sort of more like it wasn't laugh out loud. It was more of a, huh. It was like more of a, people were chuckling. There was a couple of lines and a couple of scenes that a couple of women laughed out loud. But for the most part, we just sort of sat there, right? And I was there with what I believe to be probably the target demo of this film. People who were there early, went to an early screening, were excited to see it, and the movie was just okay. It's like it's a solid 3-star film. I'd recommend it. I think it's very, very LA. And so I think maybe if you're from the Los Angeles area, I've spent time there, or from the West Coast, but in particular LA, I think this might play like gangbusters. I don't know. This also just feels like one of those movies that once it hits streaming, it's probably going to blow up and may grow in estimation over time. So I wouldn't be opposed to watching it again. It's just there were no. I can't think of any scene where I go that's like an all time classic. Holy shit, what a scene! Or any particular character who's that kind of standout that you just go, okay, this is gonna be part of the culture moving forward. There's one little weird thing that happens, and it's such a subtle moment that was in the script, and it has a setup and a punchline. It's very surreal. And it got the biggest laugh out of me. And if the movie had more of that and put Kiki and SZA into more of those kind of scenarios, I think it would have got bigger laughs out of me. But instead, I think we got a lot of Apatow kind of, here's the gist of the scene, give me 6 takes, we'll stitch it together. And that's just a vibe of comedy that just, it never works for me. I don't like it. It's just, that's my personal taste. It just, because okay, they said something funny, but you never land on the joke. You know, you never hit that button where you go, boop, that's it. Okay, boom, we got it. That's the scene, we're out. It just doesn't happen. Just everything goes on too long. So solid 3 stars for me. Let me know if you've seen or plan to see the film as we move on to the next chapter in the Leigh Whannell Universal Blumhouse horror movie, whatever the fuck that we're doing here. Wolfman. All right, Wolfman. I'm going to do no spoilers up front. Just give you my thoughts, and then I'll give you spoilers if you're a patron over at patreon.com/bingemovies. Let me take a sip of this Cortado. There are very few movies that I would feel comfortable saying are pointless. This might be one of them. Pointlessness is different than bad. This is not a bad movie. It's well directed. It's got some very inventive, a very inventive perspective when it comes to werewolves and transformation. This is obviously a follow-up to his film Invisible Man. And it follows, honestly, kind of a similar pattern, right? Maybe that's also part of my disappointment with it, because there was a novelty to Invisible Man, where, okay, we make it a elevated kind of genre version of domestic violence, and nobody believes women. That's so she's, the invisible woman, ostensibly. And that was very novel and very creative and very interesting and a great way of getting at that character. And so then we go, okay, well, the Wolfman is all about animalistic transformation, right? Masculinity being transformed into sort of violent animal stuff. And so we're going to focus on the transformation aspect of it, both in a body horror sense, kind of like The Fly, and then we're going to focus on masculine aggression. And so the whole thing is going to become a metaphor for toxic masculinity. The problem with the movie is that it's almost a movie in reverse. So what that means is, as the further the movie goes, the less interesting it becomes, and the less resolved it becomes. Right? Movies should begin at a place and move your characters through obstacles and situations and internal conflicts and external conflicts to bring about some kind of satisfying or heartwarming or tragic or sad or thrilling conclusion of some kind, right? The movie basically, first 25 minutes, I think, are extremely excellent. And if I'm going to be honest with you, well, extremely excellent is maybe hyperbole. I think it's very well done. I think it would be really hard to do this. I think they should have taken just that 25 minutes, and that should have been not a 90-minute movie called The Wolfman. And I'll get into it with spoilers, but I think that should have been basically the entire film. You would have had to do a bunch more, you would have had to add a bunch of elements to it, but that's the movie. So we get through that first 25 minutes, and then we leap forward. And it starts off pretty strong, and we leap forward like 30 years. It starts off pretty strong. We got a pretty good performance from our lead actor, who I don't think I know. I could be wrong about that. And there's some interesting ideas, and there's some interesting setups. And then all of a sudden, the writing starts to become very on the nose, and characters just say what they just say the subtext of the film. And we don't need that. And again, I might be wrong. I'm second guessing everything about what I know to be true about reality because I think that people might need that. I think we're now in this era where, Netflix had a story that came out towards the end of the year where one of the notes that they're giving to screenwriters or people who are submitting scripts for their Netflix movies is that we need characters to announce what they're doing because we don't, our audience isn't looking at the screen. They're folding laundry, they're in the kitchen, they're scrolling on their phone, they're on TikTok or Red Note or Reels or whatever. And so people aren't paying attention. So we got to tell the audience, and people that say, I'm real mad and I'm going to the kitchen. Because that's what people need. I don't need that. I find that insulting to my intelligence, as do you likely find that insulting to your intelligence if you're listening to this show. Listener, Binge Lord, I think we're alone. I think we are the minority. I think 70% of the population of your country, wherever you live in the world, needs that. And even more so if you're in the Western world. If English is your native language, your civilization is fucked. So I say I don't need characters spelling all of this shit out to me because then it becomes very obvious. And if you spell it out in the first 45 minutes, the next 45 minutes is just me sitting there watching you play out what is very obviously going to happen because you already told me in the first half of the film. The movie is also extremely hurt by the fact that the wife character in the film is badly written. It's a combination of, I think, badly written, and I would also argue badly performed. And when you have bad writing and a bad performance, and the writer and director, or co-writer and director, which would be Leigh Whannell, who I like a lot of his movies, that's his fault. Because it's his material, he's one of the co-credited screenwriters, and he's directing Julie Garner. He did not get a good performance out of her. I don't know who she is. I don't know who most of these people are, which is kind of refreshing. Blake is the ostensible Wolfman, and then there's Julie Garner, who plays Charlotte. Julie Garner was in a bunch of shit I've never seen. Oh, she was in The Americans. Is she the daughter? That can't be right. No, she's not their daughter. That's somebody else. Yeah, I don't know who this person is. I have no clue. I have no clue who she is. She's bad in the movie. I mean, to the point that these things are happy on the screen. The second half of the movie is all about transformation. That's not giving anything away. So if it's about transformation, and you have a character who's becoming animalistic, they're losing the ability to reason, they're losing the ability to speak, they're losing the ability to have empathy, they're becoming a werewolf. Whatever he wants to call this is at the end of the day, it's a wolf man. Maybe it's not a werewolf, it's a wolf man, whatever the fuck. He's got bad liberal rabies because it's in Oregon or whatever. Actually not right. He's got right-wing rabies. He's got right-wing rabies. So he's got animal derangement syndrome. And it's then dependent upon this little girl who's a kid and the wife. Their reactions have to sell us the drama. What they do, what they say, what they don't say. A movie that, as much as I hate to say it, I think does a really good job of this, is not necessarily about transformation, but it's A Quiet Place. If you look at Emily Blunt's character in A Quiet Place, or even John Krasinski, who I'm not a fan of, you look at their performance in that versus the kids and the kids' performance, and because they have to do almost everything in silence, that's a textbook, like, that's how you do it. They're selling everything with their facial expressions. Julie Garner has a blank stare throughout 2/3 of this movie. She jumps to conclusions that nobody would jump to as quickly as she does, which I think is an attempt to kind of write her intelligently, but it doesn't come off that way. And I think one of the biggest problems of the entire movie is that they kind of jump the gun on the transformation. It starts way too soon. It goes way too long. And then when we finally get to the ending, it's pointless. It's absolutely pointless. The ultimate body horror film, I think that most people would agree upon, the classic, the gold standard, is Cronenberg's The Fly. Cronenberg's done a shit ton of body horror movies, but that's the one that's the most successful. Think about how much time we spend with Jeff Goldblum before he gets in the pod. Then think about how much time we spend with Jeff Goldblum after he's been in the pod, but before he's vomiting on donuts. Then think about how much time we spend with him when he's vomiting on donuts before he's a speechless puppet. Right? It imbues the film with a ton of humanity, so that when the ending comes, you feel something. So regardless of whatever ending you could write for Wolfman, whether it's a happy ending or a sad ending or an ambiguous ending, we have to feel something when that final shot of the film happens. You know, it has to come full circle and bring us around to some kind of conclusion that we go, oh, that was worth the experience. And the movie doesn't do that because Blake's character starts transforming way too soon, and no reaction to his transformation, his illness, his sickness, whatever you want to define it as, is believable or well done at all. And so the movie just starts to kind of meander upon itself. And it really feels like a very good prologue where all the ideas are, and you keep waiting for the other shoe to drop of, like, we're going to bring this back around to where these ideas are going to pay off, and it just never does. It's really hard to describe without getting a spoiler, so I'm going to do that next for our patrons. But I'd give this one, it's maybe a 2.5 for me. I like a lot of the direction. There's some really fun use of darkness, but there is a kind of, let's get on with it. Is something going to happen here? Is this movie going to be about something? Because it feels like, hey, this movie was about something, and then it stops being about something. And I don't, it just kind of drops the ball on its own premise. I don't know. It's very strange. And also, I'm going to be honest with you, it kind of feels one note. You know, it feels like, okay, if every one of these movies is just going to become a metaphor for domestic monsters, then it's not as interesting. It's a great take for one film. It's like, what's the Dracula take going to be? You know, I don't know. You know what I mean? It's like, he's a guy and he's got problems and he's on 4chan. That makes him a vampire or something. You know, like, at a certain point you go, okay, I get it. It strikes me as a movie that aspires to be more than it ended up being, and that's a writing issue. So 2.5 stars. Would I recommend it? Not in theaters. Wait for it to stream. All right, if you are a patron, this review is going to roll on for all the spoilers for Wolfman. If you're not a Patreon, you're going to miss out. I'm sorry. Till next time, binge on.